So hello, Sabine. How are you
Hi.
doing?
Very well. Nice to meet you.
Lovely, lovely to meet you too. I must confess, I devoured Sun Damage in 2 days. I actually had some other work briefs I was meant to be working on, but this I could not put down. It's really great, like it's a real honor meeting you. Of course, I had heard of your 4 other psychological thrillers, one of them, Lie With Me, being on the Sunday Times bestseller list, and also a Richard and Judy book selection.
That was very exciting.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. But this has literally, Sun Damage has just come out, hasn't it?
Yes, this is my latest. And yeah, it's very exciting to see how it lands, and very thrilled to hear that you liked it.
I did. I would love to ask you something, because I read this review from the Sunday Times where they described it as, you kind of get 2 for 1 with this book. Of course you get like the lovely poolside read, and as I said, I devoured it in the sunshine in 2 days. But they also describe it as very much a smart observation of family life and Brits abroad, bookended by a Highsmithian thriller. How did you feel about Sun Damage being described in that way? Would you say it's an accurate representation?
Yes, I mean, I was thrilled because that's exactly what I wanted. I had this idea before writing it about it's about a con artist and a young woman who's in the south of France, conning other tourists, living, scraping together a living with an older con artist. And I had this idea of her taking on the persona of the woman that they con, and a con that goes rather disastrously wrong, which then takes the book and me as a writer into the world that always fascinates me, which is an outsider within something that seems closed. And British society and the middle class is on holiday is really ripe for that. I love the sort of, there's this kind of grifting woman from a very poor background who's very good at pretending to be other people, being a kind of chameleon. And she has to pretend to be a private chef in a private villa holiday. So it's ripe for humor, because it's a psychological thriller. The one thing I always find hard is I want to sort of be as funny as I can, and I have to sort of dial that down a bit. But yes, it's my favorite sort of thing, sort of jeopardy and the middle class is on holiday. What's not to like?
No, and it works, as you say, it's very thrilling, but it's also quite like disruptive, because you can, by being an outsider, have this lens on society and can make sometimes quite dark observations, and sometimes absolutely hilarious. It's all about those social and societal incongruities, I guess.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I was aiming for.
No, it's fantastic. And I should actually say at this point, I had great fun pairing this delightful, delicious novel with 3 delicious wines from Mouton Cadet. And Mouton Cadet, just for people who don't know the backstory about that, but that is actually run by the youngest member of the Baron Philippe de Rothschild family. And why is that so important, particularly when combining wine with literature, is that family's very into seeing wine and art as similar things and life enhancers, and literature being one of the arts. It seemed like a very natural link. And all of their labels, I mean, I'll be showing the 3 labels for all of the wines, but my favorite label is the one from the rosé, which is extremely colorful, with the ram, which is very much signified with the Baron Rothschild estate. But ever since 1945, the owner of the chateau always coordinated with artists. So we had Picasso, Dali, Jeff Koons, I think even Prince Charles did a label for him. But the whole thing is he gives artists free rein to just kind of show the joy of drinking wine. And I kind of think the rosé is what I'm going to be mainly focusing on, I guess, for this novel, because it's rosé drinking weather, and this is absolutely a poolside book. But also, all that you see is not as it seems with this rosé, which I will go into in a little bit. But you say that you've always been drawn by the subversive. What made you pick the south of France? Because again, I love that setting, because you think poolside book. Yes, we all know Brits abroad go on there. It's wonderful and relaxing. Is that why you chose to go there?
To be honest, it was much more that I started planning the book and started writing the early chapters during the first lockdown, and I had a holiday in France booked for the summer. And I thought it was practicalities. I thought, I'm going there, I'll use it as a kind of research trip. And then it became really more and more apparent that I wasn't going to get there. So actually, it was more than anything, it was a wish fulfillment. It was the holiday I wasn't having myself. I was stuck in South London, hoping to be in the south of France drinking rosé, but in fact I was drinking tea on my terrace. So yeah, it was really just wish fulfillment, I guess.
Well, actually, then that's a very powerful writing. Do you think it actually almost made it even more evocative, and even like because you were just aspiring and wanting to be there?
Yeah, I think it really did. And in fact, at one point I said to my husband, who's also a writer, I just don't think I can set it in the south of France. We're not going to get there. And I was going to use it to sort of jot notes and describe it. And he said, but you're a writer, use your imagination. So it was quite a good lesson. I thought, yes, I do have to use my imagination. And I think it was just loving describing the heat and the sea and boats and swimming pools and food and markets. It was heaven to write. I've enjoyed writing this one more than any other book, I think.
Really?
For that reason, yes.
Really? Well, no, and I mean, again, also, as you say, it's literally so ripe full of things to kind of unpick too, all of these things which you long for, but then also to show the slight underbelly, I guess, too. It was quite fun being able to deconstruct that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it starts off on this absolutely beautiful beach with these characters sort of swanning around and people on boats and sitting in cafes, and then you realize that the main characters are really picking their prey, and there's something very sort of sinister about the way in which they're finding out everything they can from this character who's only sitting a few tables away from them. And within seconds with their phones they know what her name is, where she lives, and yes, that's absolutely the sort of the dark side of things that are going on under the surface. And then again, when she gets to the villa, it's this perfect family, these families have come together on this idyllic holiday. And yet she is seeing, because she's a grifter and she notices things and that's her business, she's noticing the things that are wrong and all the little and picking things up about the characters. So that was very enjoyable. There's an awful lot of drinking as well in that.
There is a lot of
I think we should probably mention that.
Yes, there's a lot of rosé. There's lots of rosé. So that's also why I wanted to choose this one. So not only is the estate, I think, a perfect match with literature, and this is a really fantastic rosé for summer drinking. But I think also I wanted to like play on that idea of like being slightly disruptive, because I think most people, when they think of south of France rosé, they think of Provence. And actually, of course, there's some very good ones out there, but a lot of them can be a bit boring, a bit overpriced now. I'm not going to mention any certain ubiquitous brands, which grace our supermarket shelves easily in the early 20s price point. And what I love about Bordeaux Rosé is it's made from the red grapes, which you get from Bordeaux. So you have like Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, very characterful red grapes, which make still a wonderfully light looking rosé, because I know people can be grapist and look at a color.
In fact, there's a character in the book who's always going on about, as long as it's pale, as long as
exactly. So I was like, no, this will go down well.
Will go down well.
What I really love about Bordeaux Rosé is because it's got these like very character red grapes and it is kind of red wine country, you do get absolutely lovely red fruits. I mean, like when I smell it, you do get like lovely red berries and strawberries, but then I love it because you get all the red berries and strawberries, and then it suddenly goes into like a tropical guava-like thing. And like, oh, that's actually really interesting. I don't just need to put ice cubes in it, which I'm sure quite a lot of those characters in your book do. Absolutely, my mother absolutely lives by Weiss. I call it Weiss. And, but yeah, with this, it's like, oh, it's interesting. It's about 12 quid. So kind of like, it's not crazy expensive. It can be easily an easy quaffer by the pool, but actually there is this wonderful kind of extra gravitas to it. And I think it's very underappreciated Bordeaux Rosé. So if I can urge anyone, like if you want something which is great on its own by the pool, but absolutely can stand up to food. And I just also think this label's so pretty.
Very pretty, yeah.
And I think, I can imagine also your characters choosing wines based on
the label, yeah.
Which lots of us do, and absolutely it can be justified. So I thought, this is actually a bit subversive too, as a style. going back to like your main character, who I really fell in love with, again, it was like so interesting how you kind of side with her, even that she's kind of almost like an anti-hero
Yes.
in all of
And
this.
with all my novels, what I really like is a character that you start off actually thinking, oh, I don't like the cut of this person's jib.
Yeah, I can't relate to this person at all.
Yeah, they're harsh and or difficult or tricky and spiky. But what I really like as a writer is playing with the reader's sympathies and making sure that by the end you see the lightness behind the darkness, that you, as you do in life, you know, we look beyond the obvious, look beyond the surface. And yes, by the end of the book, I hope you have full sympathies with her, really. I mean, partly she's surrounded a lot of the time by horrific characters. So therefore, in contrast to these very entitled people that she's working for, I think you come to have sympathy with her too.
Yeah, and I think actually, as I say, like as a good wine, this book did linger with me, because she does become extremely relatable, and you actually just think, ooh, nature versus nurture. Like, could this person actually been a very different person? And you use that a lot with your doppelganger motifs, and there are two very young pregnancies which happen, which in different circumstances have very different outcomes. And there's a kind of sliding doors element where, like, what could so easily happen. And I didn't know whether you meant it to be taken this way, but I also, as well as being a delicious kind of character observation and observation of kind of middle-class families, it was, for me, it almost went a bit further than that. It was almost like looking at the role of the state and foster care, like how much responsibility like the foster care system has, and educational opportunities and the benefits system. I don't know whether that was me reading.
Absolutely, no, that's absolutely what, you know, it's a thriller, it's supposed to be a good read, but I can't resist also putting in these contrasts. So she's in this house and there are people of her a little bit younger than her, but she's just looking to see, she's grew up in this foster system, and I mean, she's not blaming the foster system because her sister also grew up and had the same background as her.
Absolutely.
And her life has worked out very differently, but she's looking and thinking how different things could have been for me if I had this. I mean, one of the reasons why, although it's for practical reasons, but the deeper reason for why she takes on the role of this character is to sort of see what it would be like to live in the skin of somebody who's had all those privileges and had the love from a young age that she hasn't had. So yes, that really, all those things really did interest me, going beneath the surface, not just the surface, but beneath it.
And also what I love, because I love thrillers, I love detective genres, and I must, you know, I'm a huge, because again, like the role of the detective, you always have to kind of be an outsider to observe. And I think a lot of people, and I must admit, during the pandemic, I took great comfort in Poirot, because some awful things would happen and some wonderful societal observations would be made. And then it was all tied up at the
resolved. Yeah.
And you have Poirot, who can never have a relationship or anything, because he's always like the very philosophical sage. You can like make all these wonderful, wonderful, wise words of wisdom at the end. And it's all very reassuring, particularly when I was living in LA during the riots. But what I liked, so I would always watch Poirot when I was living in LA. But what I really love, and I think probably for me, like in terms of the most powerful kind of thrillers, are those which of course are rooted in existential truths, and, you know, because actually, then it's not complete fantasy. You can actually, you look at a character and like, oh my God, I know someone like this, or I could be like this, or whatever. But the ending of yours is not resolved. It's a bit like a Shakespearean problem play. And you think, even though this character has had all kinds of opportunities, does she feel any safer? Is she, you know, and it's not going to be a spoiler, but I like how you don't come to any easy or neat conclusions.
I think it's a challenge when you're writing books, particularly if you like grayness, which I do, is that you have to try and, it is resolved. Certain things are resolved, and I hope there are things that are satisfying, but that I always want to leave it open. I mean, we know that a happy ending is only an ending for the moment, and it's really about seeing forward to what might happen next, and keeping it open. And people are still people. So
will there be a second one? Because like it's open. I would love to see a second one. Would you ever do that?
Maybe there might be. I mean, I don't think the next one is going to be a sequel, but there's been telly interest, so there's always the sense that might lead on to a second series, or I don't know, but yes, I definitely feel it's left open at the end, and that there are lots of rich possibilities for new plots and new adventures.
You just mentioned television?
Yes, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say too much yet, but yes.
Well, no, I'm so glad you did, because that was actually going to going to swiftly move me on to the second wine, the Sauvignon Blanc, from Mouton Cadet. Again, Sauvignon Blanc being a lovely summer sipper. Not many, again, it's quite, yeah, it's not the Sauvignon Blanc I don't think people think of Bordeaux and they think of white wine. I think they definitely think of red wine, but actually up until about 300 years ago, Bordeaux had far more white wine than grapes, and just due to our political alliances and whatever with France, they catered it to British taste. But what I do love about the Sauvignon Blanc, because again, it's not from very famous regions, French regions, for Sauvignon Blanc, like Sancerre, Parfumé, which already that's like a brand and it'll be quite pricey. This is about £8. And again, yeah, you do get like lovely pink grapefruit. For people who are slightly worried about gooseberry or like a bit too herbaceous, I'm not very good with herbaceous stuff going up my nose with wine. This actually is really gorgeous. It's much more pink grapefruit, citrus. It's got good weight to it. Great on its own. You talk about how you have a lot of fish dishes, obviously, in the book, and I love that description of Lulu eating her prawns. Actually, that was like I was like, that's how I eat my prawns. I'm ravenous and like almost primal. But yes, so I wanted to just talk about that, because the Sauvignon Blanc, even though it's from Bordeaux and you don't necessarily think of it, actually it's immediately transportive and evocative for me of kind of goat's cheese salads and lovely fish in summertime. Your novel, I must admit, it's interesting you talk about television, because as I read it like a film, and I didn't know if that was deliberate, but I was, and it's also, of course, the descriptions are just like so evocative, and that's why I assumed you must be in the south of France or have a house there or something. But even just, you knew the right level of twists and turns, and when there is actually a huge twist, it's all done very, very insidiously and subtly, and I could just see it plain all in my mind. I binged it like I would a Netflix series, basically. I
worry, but maybe, I mean, I'm glad that that's like, but I worry that it's because I also wrote it in lockdown and I was watching so much telly. But yeah, maybe, but yeah.
But I loved it. I didn't know how intentional that was, whether you did
really
want
intentional. I had this idea that I've been reading a lot of Mary Stuart, because I've been clearing out my mother's house, and there were all these old books that I'd read as a teenager, and her plots are very adventure-y. They're psychological thrillers, basically. These days they would be marketed as psychological thrillers, but they move very quickly, and they don't really mess around very much with backstory, although there is quite a lot of backstory in my book. But I think I had that. I think I'd been reading Mary Stuart and I'd been watching a lot of Ozark, and basically the combination of the two meant that I wrote it much more like a pacey adventure, certainly the first third, and then it slows down a bit when she gets into the house and it changes in its feel a bit. But I think maybe it was just the circumstances in which I wrote it. I'd love to say that I was just really, really thought this is how I was going to do it, but it was more accidental than that, I think.
I mean, would you see yourself, the Sunday Times compared you to Patricia Kingsmith, do you see yourself as someone who, as well as doing novels, might even do short stories, might even do like television adaptation, like would that
I don't think I don't know about short stories, but television adaptation is certainly something that I'm now slightly pursuing, through the interest that this book has has led me into other areas. So yes, I think I might be working on that at the moment slightly.
I'm so glad, because I read it like that, and I just think it's fantastic. I mean, do you have any writers or artistic inspirations when you sit down to write?
Well, always Barbara Vine. I think she is absolutely just my number one. And as I say, I think Mary Stuart is really underrated. Daphne du Maurier. Basically, female writers who write the same sorts of books have written the same sorts of books that I write, in different times, and I think they just have slightly different concerns. They have different priorities, but it's the same sort of desire for character and plot to be totally interconnected and to be both literary and also exciting. I think it's that simple, really.
Do you ever get annoyed? Because I definitely, just when I listen to some writers, if female writers, and when they tend to write maybe more like domestic, like it's kind of described as domestic fiction or whatever. Yeah. Do you think that there's sometimes pejorative terms or tones used in kind of detective, or thriller?
Yeah, I do think there is a sort of, I think whenever women write, if it's something patronizing in the way in which it's talked about, I just think there is, no matter how much people are trying to fight against it. I think it is. Yeah. And yeah, the domestic noir thing was, and even this psychological thrillers are, just the term itself is become a sort of, it's become patronizing in a weird way. I don't know. I think the fact that you're, the fact that you're placing a label on something when all these books are very different, and books that are, I know, presented a bit the same these days, but I suppose that is just the way of business.
I mean, how would you like to be seen as, or describe yourself?
That's a very good question. I just would like to be myself. I'd like to be, I suppose that is the desire, to be Sabine Durrant, to be a Sabine Durrant book rather than another psychological thriller, I suppose, is, a bit like you were talking about wines, everything, you want it to be distinctive and to be itself, and not to be just another white or another rosé.
It occupies its own place.
Yeah.
And compared to your other novels, because you said you had the most fun writing this, why do you think that was?
I think because it was very different. I think the books that I've enjoyed writing most are the ones that are the life of the main character, and the setting is far removed from myself. So my earlier books were very much set in the area of South London where I live. And I think I was much more sort of inward when I was writing them. I was thinking, what would I do in this circumstance, or what would happen if? Whereas this, and I think actually Finders Keepers, which is about an older woman who's a hoarder, is very different to me. And also Lie With Me was another adventure set in Greece. Actually, I did do a bit of research for that one, and I rented a house near where the Rothschild estate is in Corfu.
No way!
Yeah, funnily enough. It's set in a mythical island, but the research that I did was in Corfu. So yes, I think those books, and it's from a male perspective, Lie With Me. So that's a very different sort of...
Oh, I have to read that.
Viewpoint to my own, obviously, yeah.
Confession, I've never actually really admitted this out loud ever, but I think one day, if I ever did write a book not about wine, I would love to do something around the detective genre, because I love people and I love looking at the condition of human nature. What tips would you give to any aspiring writers wanting to create? What do you think it takes, really, the ingredients?
Somebody said to me, I think these things become received opinions, but I think as there always are truth and cliches, just write every day. Give yourself a deadline, stick to it. Don't be put off by self-doubt, and don't show it to anybody. So absolutely get to the end of something. I think Stephen King said you write the first draft with the door closed and the second draft with the door open. But I think that is very, very good advice, really. Write. Don't think about other people till you finish.
No.
When I'm writing, I absolutely give myself a bit. Oh, we've frozen, have we?
Have I?
Are you frozen? Oh no, you're better. You're unfrozen. Yeah. I used to be a journalist, and I think being a journalist has been very good. Gave me a very good stead in writing. When I am writing a novel, and I absolutely make myself write every day. I write 1,000 words a day, and I just, if they're not coming, I just force them out and write any old rubbish that comes out, and then edit it the next day. But I make myself reach that deadline.
Do you have a certain time every day when you do it, or?
No, the dream is to start at 9 and be finished by 10, and then do something else. That's my absolute dream. But usually I start at 9 and I'm not finished till 7 at night, because I've done a lot of prevarication along the way. Quite often I've done nothing by 5 o'clock. And
okay, this is really deeply reassuring. Okay. I love how you write about food. I love food and writing, but your descriptions of the fresh produce are incredible, and the markets. also, it's used as a very powerful tool in terms of relationships developing, and also it's how Ali survives. Is cooking something very important to you and your family?
Yes, I love food and I love cooking. And I also saw the potential for a brilliant jeopardy of this woman who's come in to be the chef, thinking it's going to be a doddle, and having to sort of literally, you know, the first night they say, oh, we're so looking forward to your chicken cacciatore. And she's thinking, what the hell is cacciatore? So that's, and there's a, you know, she's very good at sort of making things look nice, Ali, and so she spends a lot of time making little towers out of bread. And as the reader, I hope that you're just thinking, what about the food? You know, you've got 11 people to feed, don't make a bread tower, worry about. And as she opens the fridge in the morning and there's a little bit of camembert left in a little bit of shriveled bit of paper. So I love the sort of aspect of it, of in terms of making the jeopardy for the reader, the sort of humorous jeopardy. And also there's one character, it's rich for so many areas of human observation, but you know, the relationship with the middle class British families who are sort of want to treat her like part of the family, but are also just holding out their drink for her to fill without saying a please or a thank you. But there's one character in the house who is a good cook, and he's a slight outsider himself, and he clearly notices, and I think the first clue is when she puts lavender instead of rosemary into something.
It actually made me think, I was like, I wonder what lavender would taste. You know, it actually got me thinking, I never thought of that.
Yeah, I think sort of, yeah. Anyway, so yes, I really enjoyed the whole food aspect. I think that was and then they cook together, and he's sort of being very gentle with her, and there's a sort of, yeah, you get sort of sex and food at the same time. Yeah.
I totally fell in love with Rob. I can't lie, it was just,
there's a scene in which he asks her to peel some tomatoes, and you don't really know until because it's obviously her narration, but at one point he suggests that he gives her a bottle of a pan of boiling water and suggests she puts the tomatoes in it. And if you can cook at all, you know that trying to peel a tomato without having soaked them first is
it's game over. Well, I was thinking, okay, I know we don't often think of red wines for summer, but actually for barbecues, and also a lot of the dishes which are mentioned in the book, the duck confit, the lamb dish, we had like charcuterie and cheese, you know, like, you know, easy lunches, which kind of let Ali off the hook a little bit and gave it some respite. I had to end with the Mouton Cadet, their Rouge from 2018, which again, I want to say is around the £10 mark. And it's fantastic. I mean, Mouton Rothschild is known for very opulent, flamboyant styles of Bordeaux. So it like absolutely, you know, opulates. I just made up a word.
It's a very good word. Write that book.
It's redolent and resonates with that lovely black currant and like kind of dark plums and
I can have some water. I've been left out.
I know, don't worry, the wines are coming to you, and I would love to meet up and chat over wine, so we will rectify this. But trust me when I say, you know, this is absolutely, it's juicy, it's succulent, it's fun, and would go really, really well with many of the dishes mentioned.
Particularly chicken cacciatore, I'd say.
Oh yeah, chicken cacciatore. Yeah, don't forget about that. No, that would be, I know, I felt so sorry for her when she did that. And then she mentions that there's a great department in the supermarket in the frozen section.
Yeah, that's where she finds her confit.
The food of the family been eating from the frozen food department. It's so great.
And don't notice. That's even
and
better.
Don't notice. Yeah, and then, but yeah, you do. No one is perfect in that house, but you do end up. There's like a few characters you really end up. Again, you want to think of them in a certain box, and I think us Brits are very, very good at putting people into boxes. And I really like actually the relationships which develop and the alignments which are made in that house.
And I think she arrives just thinking they're all just, you know, that basically they're all marks, they're all ready to be conned, and yet she gradually gets sympathy with them too. So yes,
no, I really, really love that, and the support she gets. But no, I want to say thank you so much for your time. I can't recommend Sun Damage anymore, guys. My mum's already
thanks.
got a copy. I'm giving this one to my best friend. She has to return it. And now I want to read Lie With Me, because I love your acute observations of people. Where do you think that comes from? Was that just a curiosity in other people, or?
I think I'm an only. I am an only child. Don't think it. I know I'm an only child, and I think I think as a result of that, I grew up in watching other people's families a lot, and watching other people and thinking, why are they different to me? And so yeah, I think it probably has come from that and reading a lot of books as a result of being an only child.
Yeah, well, no, it really, really comes across, and I'm very curious to see how you write from a male perspective with Lie With Me.
Enjoy it. Yeah,
it's next on the list. But thank you
so much. Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a real joy, and I look forward to actually sharing a glass with you in real life.
Yes, let's do that
in the future. Yes,
fancy the rosé.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.